check.
What's going on, everybody? My name is AAA, and 11 years before Nathan Drake captured the hearts of PlayStation gamers everywhere, and 17 years before Crystal Dynamics put Tomb Raider's name back on the map where it used to be after a large string of incredibly mediocre games, Lara Croft was already making waves in the gaming community for not only being a badass female protagonist in a video game, but also being a badass female protagonist in a really good video game. Alright, looking at it by today's standards, it doesn't really look that impressive, and if you take into account that the controls were also not so wonderful, a lot of people who haven't played it might be a little confused why it got so popular. Me being born 4 years after the original game came out and only ever owning a Wii, a PS3, and a PS4, and now a Nintendo Switch in my entire lifetime, I was also one of those very confused people, and I wasn't sure why it garnered so much fame. But then I realized that besides Mario 64, and just barely besides that, mind you, this was the first true 3D action-adventure game out there, and in terms of Europe, it was actually the very first one. Not only that, but the sense of exploration and finding hidden tombs and running around shooting things in the original game just felt so cool and fresh and made you feel like an awesome adventurer. Oh, and then out of nowhere you have to fight a frickin' T-Rex. I could finally see why Lara Croft became such a huge icon, but as I researched her further, I got some not so wonderful information also along the way. Before I get into that, let's discuss the way the scoring system is going to work here. The original Game Off series finally got an actual scoring system, and also my first franchise episode split everything up really nicely, and by this point I believe my first developer episode has come out also. Sorry, again, I'm pre-recording this since I'm going on vacation, and this will come out while I'm on that vacation. But anyways, the developer episode added a new addition by looking at Metacritic scores as well, which I might use in some capacity in some of the other series also. Edit, I actually used this in the Game Off series that happened, that I recorded after this, but came out before this. This is really confusing. I've only been doing this for a couple weeks, so I'll be making some tweaks here for a while, but in terms of characters, this is a little bit tougher. There's not too many ways you can break down all characters into a fair grading system, especially when some of them are written so differently, and some of the best characters are actually villains. What makes the Joker great and what makes Kratos great are two very different things. So we won't be working with exact subsections and appointing points in the same way that we have been doing. Instead, every character will have a ranking from 0 to 100. Each of them will start off neutral at 50. We'll talk about their individual strengths and weaknesses throughout the video, and depending on how great those strengths and weaknesses are, they will gain or lose points accordingly. We'll end up with a final number out of 100, and that's their character score. Pretty simple. With all that out of the way, let's get into how Lara Croft has evolved throughout the past 21 years. Well, back in the days of the original Tomb Raider, gaming wasn't really big on story, or at least it wasn't as present as it is now, and Lara, taken on her own, wasn't a mind-blowingly amazing character. But she did end up being the face of adventure and action gaming for a long time, considering just how impactful that first game was. She cemented herself in a kind of gaming Indiana Jones type of role that made her a household name pretty quickly. There was just one problem, and it had nothing to do with any kind of gameplay mechanic or story hitch or bad writing and or plot hiccups, no. It had to do with how she looked. With most marketing for gaming, at that point at least, being directed towards boys, since at the time it was assumed that girls just didn't play video games, Lara being female was seen as a real opportunity to the developers. Eidos realized that they had a character that could captivate gamers through sex appeal alone, and so they doubled down on that idea in the next entry, giving her bigger curves and a lower top, along with a smaller waist, although she kind of always had that. Instead of the gaming Indiana Jones, she was now being used as the gaming Barbie doll, or the gaming Marilyn Monroe. I never really understood this considering, back then she was so cubish. Okay, I get that video games were not as detailed as you got, but still, there were mediums like magazines or movies that actually had, real-world females for people to find attractive. There was also real life, so it's not like people back then didn't know what attractive was. So why did they find this incredibly unrealistic looking character hot? Was it just because of the curves? This hourglass has curves, but that doesn't mean you're attracted to this, does it? Is all I have to do put a female's head on this and then, oh, well, hello, beautiful, Anyways, regardless of if it makes sense or not, it worked, and Lara's sex appeal was officially her leading personality trait. For the longest time, it was her main push, and you can tell it was hurting the actual quality of the games, since the late 20th century, early 21st century Tomb Raider games were not well received at all. There's an article on GamesRadar about the 17 Tomb Raider games that were ranked, and aside from mobile games at number 17, everything before the top 10 is a game between 1998 and 2003, and they're all pretty significantly bad. The games were then rebooted in 2006 and started getting a little bit better, but it seemed like gaming's Barbie was just starting to sell less and less, with Underworld selling pretty low at 2.6 million copies, and definitely not being the juggernaut it once was. And then 2013 happened. Not only was Tomb Raider rebooted once more, but Tomb Raider decided to take Lara a bit more seriously this time around. While she may have still been objectified by players themselves, who were no doubt missing the good old 500 polygon days and how great she looked back then, but decided that this more realistic Lara looks okay, I guess. At least the developers themselves worked towards making her a real person this time around. Until now, she'd been riding the wave of having a large chest and yelling dibs when somebody asked who the first action-adventure hero should be. And now finally we got some legitimate character depth with the 2013 reboot. So what did this new Lara bring? Well, first of all, she was pretty well written. I'm not going to say that the stories in these new games blew me away. I've seen better stories in video games, and sometimes the transitions seem a little funky and I lose immersion, but the best parts of the game were Lara herself. They give her good, non-cheesy dialogue, and even though she's an amateur, you're forced to take her seriously with the way she acts. She's also a character you tend to empathize with. She goes through a lot of stuff, and a lot of people doubt her, especially when you look at the beginning of Rise of the Tomb Raider. But she displays this bravery while also going through many hardships, both mentally and physically, and you just gain a connection with her through all her struggles and the way she handles them. She gets laughed at times, and early in Rise of the Tomb Raider we see how her dad was also laughed at, and how she took up his mantle. And yet she fights for what she believes in and doesn't let people who doubt her get in her way. This isn't something we've never seen before in a character, but it's still an appealing trait, especially when people are able to relate to it in their own lives. For example, I might see on this channel that some people won't like me, and if I start growing, I'll form a group that doesn't like what I do, but I have to keep moving past that. It's those subconscious connections that really help a character appeal to audiences. She's also tough as nails. I mean, look what she goes through at the beginning of the 2013 reboot. She gets insanely shaken up from a boat crash, water sends her spiraling in all kinds of direction and she nearly drowns, somehow makes it out, falls a good distance into the water below and hits it so hard it might as well be cement at that point. She gets shaken up again by the sea in the middle of a storm, then she's punched in the face, flipped upside down for God knows how long, set on fire, and then lands on a metal pipe that she pulls out from herself, and with this injury still in effect, starts clambering her way out of this collapsing cave in about 1,000 impossible ways and finally reaches safety. And this is all done in the span of like 5 minutes. A little over the top? Yeah, but it's a video game, so whatever. This girl is a force of nature, and you're absolutely forced to look past her gender and just respect her as an individual. So good job, Crystal Dynamics. Also, don't underestimate how hard it is to make a female character both badass and not over the top at the same time. When people set out to make an awesome female character, a lot of the time they go too far and make them seem superhuman and greater than any other being that has ever existed. These people are so badass that they can open lion jaws and punch out Chuck Norris. Finding a good middle ground is difficult. Even Naughty Dog, who are known for making great female characters, made Nadine a little too overpowered in my opinion. But Lara in this game shows that she can handle anything, but is still human. And that's really hard, so major props there. Okay, so let's count this up. Lara was a pioneer for 3D action-adventure gaming, and for most people she was the first real look into that 3D action world, and the game was crafted really well. But then, she was objectified. A lot. She didn't really stand for anything anymore, and her only purpose was to make other things stand up, if you know what I mean. But when she got rebooted, she was very well written, she became very empathetic, she fought for things that meant a lot to her no matter what everyone else said, she was incredibly tough and took so much emotional and physical punishment, and finally she was a great balance of, like I said, pure awesome and a flawed human that could feel pain. That puts her at a total of 81 for her character all time, and the new Lara is probably closer to a 90, but unfortunately a large chunk of her legacy is not exactly wonderful. I wish I could give her more, but considering how much damage some of the games did to her identity and personality, an 81 is an impressive feat. If you guys are wondering why the past 2 Game Offs have now introduced new branches of the series, and both had near 80 rated competitors to start off, I tried to pick competitors that were good, but not absolute juggernauts, because I didn't want to end up doing a big name first. And it turns out as we go along doing these episodes, all of the other games, all the other characters, all the other developers end up underneath my first video, and so my first video is just my #1 spot. That's not really super engaging now, is it? But still, an 81 is a good score, and especially for a character that's gone through ups and downs like Lara has. And almost any long-term icons experience low points at some point or another. And you're going to see that as the series goes along, so I legitimately think Lara can duke it out for a pretty high spot. That said, let me know in the comments below what you want to see next in the character branch of the series, or any other branch also, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.